My name is Becca Vogt. I'm the Senior Recruitment Manager here at Immigrant Justice Corps, and we're just really excited to talk with you a little bit more about Immigrant Justice Corps, as well as our Justice Fellowship Class of 2026, which we are currently recruiting for. So what to expect from this presentation? We're going to go over what IJC is all about, introduce you to our theory of change, and describe the Justice Fellowship in more detail. We also will give an overview of our fellowship and legal training services that we offer to our fellows, and this is a way that we support you in your 2 years of the fellowship. We also want to provide more detailed information on the Justice Fellowship application and selection process. And of course, we're going to have a Q&A at the end to answer any of your questions. There is a Q&A feature probably on the bottom of your screen. So feel free to ask questions during the presentation, but we're going to answer them once we get at the end. So first, what is our vision here at Immigrant Justice Corps? Our vision is that all immigrants, regardless of status, are treated with dignity and respect and have access to justice. How do we achieve this vision? What are the pathways to change that can allow this vision to become a reality? So we identified a few pathways here. First, we believe laws need to be reformed to be humane and transparent. Also, social norms need to be changed to value immigrants within our society. We also need a judiciary and administrative system that produces humane jurisprudence and equitable determinations. And where we feel we really shine as an organization is we believe every immigrant should have access to quality legal representation. So what do we do as an organization? If you're here, you likely know that for immigrants facing threat of deportation or perhaps pursuing lawful status and citizenship, nothing makes a greater difference than having legal representation, and not only having legal representation, but skilled legal representation. Our organization was founded recognizing the systemic failings of the immigration legal system. And so IJC was born to mobilize quality counsel to meet the needs of vulnerable immigrant communities nationwide. So we do this in a few ways. First, we recruit, like we're doing today. We recruit and award promising committed new lawyers and college graduates with 2-year fellowships, providing an entry point into this field of immigration law. Not only do we provide an entry point, but we want to support our fellows during these 2 fundamental years and beyond. But we train our fellows to become experts in the field and continue with ongoing skills development, as well as having support through our network of alumni. So we really want to make sure that you feel supported in these first 2 years so that hopefully you can continue this career long term. Not only do we recruit and train, we also mobilize our fellows. So we place our fellows with vetted host organizations, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that have established programs and connections to underrepresented communities. And this is where our fellows work in direct service to help immigrants in need of legal services. So overall, what is this IJC Justice Fellowship? Our Justice Fellows are recent law graduates, so within 2 years of law school graduation. So the first kind of beginning, usually, of a career in immigration law. And our fellows do a variety of representation. So they provide quality representation for immigrant communities in need. And these can be varied. We'll talk a little bit more about host organizations and focus areas, but most of our fellows are doing removal defense representation. It could be detained or non-detained, also humanitarian forms of relief. Some fellows focus on representation of unaccompanied children and families. And they also participate in community engagement, such as Know Your Rights Know Your Rights presentations, intakes, as well as pro se application assistance clinics, things of that nature. Overall, this is a 2-year secured placement with one of our partnered host organizations. And we do have a guaranteed minimum salary of $62,500 per year in benefits. So I keep talking about host organizations. What do we mean by host organizations? Our host organizations are legal service providers, and they're located all over the country. We started about 11 years ago now in New York City only, but we've expanded to over 30 states, and we've partnered with over 100 organizations in our 11, 12-year history. These are just some of the logos of some of our partners that we're currently partnered with that have fellows at their organizations, but again, this varies. So our host organizations do vary every year. So organizations, whether they're new to us and have never hosted before or returning to host fellows, again, always have to apply annually if they want to be considered to host fellows. So every year we have a different offering of host organizations available. As I mentioned, they vary in geographic location. So we'll have a map in a little bit where you can kind of see where we've had fellows in the past, but we're always looking to expand as well. But again, since our host orgs vary every year, the geographic locations available also vary every year. And I mentioned a little bit that some of our organizations have specific scopes of work that they might specialize in or focus on. So these could be certain client focuses such as youth or domestic violence survivors, different populations, or perhaps it's more issue focused. Maybe they mostly do detention work or their crim-im is their specialty, asylum cases, things of that nature. These organizations differ in style as well. It could be holistic or community movement lawyering. As well as staffing, we have some organizations that are huge and national and have multiple branches throughout the country. And we also have some grassroots local organizations that perhaps are just a few attorneys plus our fellows working in communities to provide representation. Salary, like I mentioned, IJC guarantees a minimum of $62,500 per year, but we always get the question because some of our organizations are in higher cost of living areas, so they may be able to offer more of a salary depending on where they are in the country and available funds. And these organizations also vary in resources. Like I mentioned, some of these larger organizations might have more access to resources and language line and things of that nature, whereas some organizations maybe are in legal service deserts and the funding is not as available. So there's a lot of variety in our host organization experiences, and I feel like there's always an option for everyone when you're looking at what organizations you might be interested in working with as a fellow. So here's that map I mentioned of where we have hosted fellows throughout our history. So any of the blue shaded in states are where we've hosted fellows either currently or in the past. So we're really excited. Again, we started in New York City about 11, 12 years ago. And really excited by the expansion we've made over this past decade. So why IJC? I know I've talked a little bit of an overview of our organization and the fellowship, but why is the Justice Fellowship a great next step? So what sets us apart as a fellowship is definitely our training programs. We're very well known for our training for our fellows. It starts with a month-long fall onboarding. So this is a month of trainings that we give you everything we could think of that you need to know before you get started in the field of immigration law. You will do an in-depth, substantive training with us at IJC before you'd start at your host organization, typically end of September, early October. We also offer monthly trainings for CLE credit because everything is changing. Things change very quickly in this field. So we want to make sure we can adapt and share the most current information with our fellows possible. These monthly trainings allow us to focus on that or specialty areas that our fellows are requesting more training in. We also have regional expertise. We'll talk a little bit more about our regional model here in a bit, but just know you have access to folks that are close to your region or know what goes on in the circuit that you might be representing clients in. We also have ongoing support in legal skills development. Our IJC email listserv is a fantastic resource. You are connected via email to all current and alumni fellows from the past 11, 12 years of our existence. So we see all the time folks emailing, asking questions. It's really cool sometimes to see, you know, a first-year fellow asking a question and see an alumni from our inaugural class answer. It's a really great resource that you'd have access to, of course, while you're a fellow and then as an alumni as well. We also have a legal resources library and we provide technical assistance where needed. We also know this work is difficult, so community building is a huge part of our fellowship. This starts with our in-person fall training kickoff. So the beginning of that September training, we tried to bring folks together in person to meet the rest of your cohort, meet the IJC staff that will be supporting you over the next 2 years. So this year we brought our class of 2025 to New York City at the beginning of this month. Actually, it was so great to see everyone in person. So there was the ability to bond, do some trainings together, explore New York City a bit before going back for the last 3 weeks with remote training. We also offer community building through our office hours. They're bi-weekly, so you can meet with our fellowship and TLTA teams every other week during office hours to ask questions, to get technical assistance and things like that, as well as our regional staff host virtual events so that you can continue getting to know folks within your region. As far as financial support, and of course, this is based on need and subject to available funds, but in the past few years, we've been able to offer a bar exam and preparation stipend. So this is actually financial support up to $2,500 in reimbursement for bar exam prep courses or state bar exam fees. We know this is a very expensive thing to go through. So we hope that this is a great resource for our fellows and have heard good feedback. For our documented fellows, we do assist with payment of renewal fees, and we do offer a signing bonus of $2,000 for all of our Justice Fellows to indicate our excitement in having you join. All right, fellowship support. So our fellowship team really supports our fellows from a well-being side of things, professional development side of things. So I'd already mentioned some of the regional programming and events, but I want to highlight our wellness and support program. So we partner with licensed mental health service providers to have guided discussions and interactive workshops around different topics and themes that our fellows will encounter likely during their work as a fellow and also in this career long term. So here's just some interesting topics that we've held these discussions and workshops around. Deconstructing perfectionism was very highly, we got a lot of great feedback from that guided discussion, as well as stress management, secondary trauma, self-care, burnout, setting boundaries, amongst other topics. So really, we want to help you take care of yourself in this hard work. And so we set up these wellness and support programming to assist in those ways. We also have biannual check-ins. So these are formal one-on-one meetings with IJC staff twice a year to let us know how are things going, what's going well, what could be going better. But you do have assigned regional staff that, if something happens outside of those biannual check-ins, you have a point person to go to talk to. If you want to talk about having a conversation with a supervisor or something going on in a case, you have staff on IJC side where you can reach out at any time. We also offer professional mentorship, and this includes second-time bar test taker programming. So, if for whatever reason you don't pass the bar the first time, we do have programming in place to help you succeed with taking the bar the second time. We actually pair you with alumni that also were in the same situation, and they give kind of some guidance and mentorship and support as you're going for that second attempt. And of course, in general, you're connected to our alumni network for additional support, mentorship, and professional development. We do our best to connect you. If you have questions, we find someone in our alumni network that can help support you in that. All right, now our training and legal technical assistance team, our TLTA for short, because that is quite a mouthful. This is a bit of where our regional representation and staffing come in. So we have an East Coast, a New York, a Midwest, and a West Coast managing attorney that have regional expertise and really know what's going on in these areas of the country, because how immigration law works in New York City is very different from how it works in Las Vegas. So we want to make sure you have expertise and can reach out to folks that know what's going on in your region now that we are more of a national presence. So our TLTA team are the ones that lead that fall training and also provide additional substantive legal training and education through the monthly trainings. You can see some examples here. We had a trial skill workshop that folks really appreciated, doing a bond hearing, a mock trial, all of that. We also had legal writing for immigration practitioners as a monthly training, an unaccompanied minor asylum law training. So we really get into detail on different areas that our fellows are needing additional support with. They also provide technical assistance and bi-weekly case rounds. So you're welcome to come and discuss your case, and there's other fellows there. Our staff are there to give some ideas on maybe how to approach a problem or an argument. So we think this is a really valuable resource, not only to stay connected, but also to have access to legal skills development with our expert managing attorneys. And a lot of our managing attorneys actually were former fellows. So it's really great to kind of see that they completed their fellowship many years ago and practiced in immigration law, and now they're on staff, mentoring and guiding our fellows in their experiences. So great. So here's just some visuals of some of the community building and opportunities that we've had in the past. The top left-hand corner was our alumni convening this past year, where we invited IJC alum to come together for a set of training. We also have our fall training. So this picture on the right hand side is from 2024, our fall training where we brought in all of the fellows. We actually went to Montgomery, Alabama that year for our in-person component. And just some other pictures of trainings and speaking opportunities. We really want you to feel connected to others in the fellowship, not only in your cohort, but also alumni. So in summary, we really do feel that if you're interested in immigration law, this is the best fellowship for you. We are very committed to helping you become the best immigration advocate possible. We offer a ton of trainings, wellness, professional support, and we have that regional expertise to help you sustain in this field while you're becoming that expert. You're also going to be joining a community of passionate, like-minded individuals because this work cannot be done alone. It's really important to have community. And our network is several hundred fellows and alumni. So you're going to be connected to a wealth of information and passionate individuals that would be a resource to you, not only during your fellowship, but beyond. All right, we talked a lot about the fellowship. What does it look like to apply? What does the selection process look like? So first, we want to talk about eligibility. So applicants may be currently enrolled in a JD or LLM program as long as they will graduate law school by the spring of the fellowship start year. So for this year, if you're graduating this upcoming spring 2026, you would be eligible to apply for the class of 2026. So you would be able to apply now with our application that's currently open. If you're graduating in 2027, you can kind of do this math 1 year later, if that makes sense. For this year, applicants may have graduated from a JD or LLM program up to 2 years prior to the start of the fellowship. So in this case, it's no earlier than spring 2025, or sorry, spring 2024. So if you graduate in spring 2025 or in spring 2024, you would be eligible for this class of 2026. At time of selections, applicants must be eligible for work authorization in the US for the full 2 years of the fellowship. We have this fourth bullet here because we get asked it a lot, but IJC fellows often speak a second language in addition to English, but this is not a requirement at all to apply. So who are we looking for during the selection process? You know, we're really seeking fellows that are thoughtful and compassionate and empathetic, also creative, because sometimes you have to be really creative as you're seeking positive outcomes for your clients. Overall, dedicated to immigrant justice, committed to the idea of a fellowship program. As you probably gathered from what we shared as far as resources and what our alumni are involved in, we really want fellows that want to contribute and be a part of these resources, as well as give back, hopefully, as an alumni as well. We our fellows ideally speak another language in addition to English, though again, this is not a requirement. But overall, we're looking for folks that want to pursue a future working in the field of immigration law as a career long-term. What will you see on the application? What do we ask for? So we have an application form. We do ask for a copy of your resume, 1 to 2 pages maximum, please. We also ask for an unofficial law school transcript. We do not need official transcripts at this time. We ask for a statement of interest, which is 500 words or less. This is where you can let us know why you're interested, why you believe you would be a good fellow, and why this is the best next step for you. And then we have an essay question, which is also 500 words or less. And we do ask for 2 letters of recommendation. So what are some application tips? Be sure to gather the application components and feel free to complete on your schedule. We do not do early review of applications. Our application for the class of 2026 is due on October 19th, and we do not review applications before the end of the deadline. So as long as it's in by the deadline and complete, we will review your application. So we encourage you to take your time, but also don't miss that deadline. We really encourage you to proofread and proofread and proofread again, and then get a second pair of eyes to proofread. You'd be very surprised how many applications we do receive with grammar errors that call us ICJ rather than IJC. It really sticks out. So be sure to look through and proofread, and you can have a second pair of eyes also proofread for perhaps things that you missed. We really encourage you throughout the application to highlight your experiences in immigration law if you have them. But if not, any work with clients is super helpful to know about and or any other public interest work. We encourage you to get as personal as thoughtful as you feel comfortable. We want to understand why you're passionate about this work and why you want to do it long term. As far as recommendation letters, we really encourage you to choose recommenders that know you well and can express that familiarity, whether that's with the type of work you did at a immigration clinic, those are really great, or perhaps they were a supervisor during an internship, somebody that can speak to your work. And if they can speak to your work in immigration, that's even better. But just make sure that they know you well and can express that to us. We also encourage you to gently remind your recommenders and give them plenty of time to complete this. Recommendation letters, they can take a while. So be sure to request early and also put their names and emails into our system so they get that link to submit the recommendation letter, and gently follow up with them if they have not submitted. We also ask on the application about your language abilities. So don't overplay or underplay. We'll give you kind of a system to let us know where you are. But you are also really encouraged to let us know if you're planning to work on these skills. If you have classes lined up, there will be open-ended space where you can share more about your language learning journey. And of course, be mindful of the timeline. When that deadline happens on October 19th at 11:59 p.m., that is the deadline, and that is also the deadline for recommendation letters. So be really mindful of that. So speaking of timeline, our application for the class of 2026 is open now. It opened in July. We always typically open mid-July for any of our classes. So if you're waiting for the next class, it'll open this following July. But our application for the class of 2026 will close on Sunday, October 19th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern, like I mentioned. After the application closes, we immediately have our selection committee review all Justice Fellow applications. From there, we schedule interviews with prospective fellows that were recommended by the application reviews to move on to the interview stage. We're planning to conduct interviews in early November, and after the interviews have concluded, we will announce finalists and those placed on the waitlist. Finalists will engage in what we call the ranking stage of our matching process with our potential host organizations, and that process will continue into January. Our goal is by end of January or early February that all of our placements will be filled, matches will be complete, and we'll be sending offers to our class of 2026 to become Justice Fellows. Of course, there's plenty usually keep folks busy between February and the September start. Likely you're completing your last year of law school, getting ready for the bar exam, but we'll be in touch about the start of your fellowship in September with that monthly training. So I talked about the matching process, and this is always a huge question. How do I know which host organization I will be placed at? And the answer is you help us decide that. So there is a ranking stage. If you're selected as a finalist, you'll receive, basically it's a huge spreadsheet with all of our host organization placement offerings for the year. It'll have the exact name of the organization, the exact address that you would be expected to report to, if they're hybrid, if they're fully in person. It'll go into the type of work that you should expect to participate in as a fellow at the organization. It also goes into that pay and benefits information because you would become an employee of the organization, so that will vary from org to org. So you're going to be asked to review all of the placement options and rank. You're going to let us know here at IJC who you're interested in working with and who you're not interested in working with. We would never place you with an organization that you're not interested in working with. But for those organizations you are interested in working with, you're going to submit a very short, limited statement of interest for them, as well as a new copy of your resume, and we'll send that information to the host organization, and they do a similar ranking process as well with any candidates that express interest in working with them. They let us know at IJC who they're interested in working with, or perhaps who might not be the best fit in the moment. From there, we do what's called matching. So IJC will take the response from our finalists and the response from our host organizations and make matches based on our finalists' needs and interests, as well as our host organization's needs and interests. And if we have a match, we will send you what's called a tentative offer, connecting you with that organization. You have about a week or so to meet with them, have a virtual conversation. We encourage you to treat it like an interview. Some folks interview very formally, some have a more informal conversation, but you'll get to talk with the organization, ask questions, make sure it feels like a good fit. And at the end of that week, you will have the opportunity to either accept or decline your placement. So if you accept and your host organization accepts the placement, that's when you're officially a Justice Fellow for the upcoming class, and we'll send you an offer letter. So I know that was a lot of information. So again, if you're eligible for this upcoming class and you're interested in applying, we really encourage you to apply now. At least start the application so you can see in detail what you need to put together, and especially get those recommendation, requests in for your recommenders on the application portal. And we also want to plug an upcoming webinar we have next week, actually, at the same time on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So this will be different than the one that you've just seen, but it goes into a lot of details, all our tips and tricks about the application process. So if you have questions, just know we're going to give you what we see, suggestions for every piece of material we ask for. So if you really want to refine your application, we encourage you to sign up for our webinar next week. So here's the QR link, and then you can also find this link on our website. On the Justice Fellow webpage, there's also a link to this registration as well if you miss it on this presentation. So we're excited to start the Q&A now. This is the follow-up emails, just in case you maybe forget to ask a question or don't want to ask a question. This Q&A box, you can always reach out to our recruitment email here listed on the page, and this is also my work email where you can connect with me. So I'm going to see we have quite a few questions in the chat already, which is very exciting. I'm just going to pull them up here so I can start answering some of them. So please feel free to use that Q&A feature. If you have any questions, would be happy to answer them. So the first question is, will this recording be shared afterwards? Yes, anyone that has registered for this webinar will receive a copy of the recording. It typically takes a little bit for us to get that recording in, so it should come to you sometime tomorrow via email. We'll send a link to the recording that you can review. Somebody asked, and the slides too, will they be shared? We won't share these direct slides, but it will be available as part of the presentation if you'd like to watch it again. Wonderful. Great, here's another question. It asks questions regarding applicants who are not fluent in a second language. Is it possible for these applicants to secure an IJC fellowship? Is there any way for such applicants to know in advance which organizations don't require fluency or even proficiency in a second language? So fantastic question. So how we approach this is when we get to that matching phase, and you receive that spreadsheet of all the host organizations in placements available. Our host organizations do share if they require fluency or they just prefer fluency, if they would be able to host a fellow that does not speak a second language. There's a whole column that will list that response from the host organization. So if you do not speak a second language or you're working on speaking a second language but are not fluent, it would require use of an interpreter during legal work with clients, you'll be able to scan that and use that as a way of, guiding your matching process and who you might express interest in working with. If there is an organization that does require Spanish, so typically for our organizations that work with detained clients, there isn't access to a language line, there isn't access to an interpreter, so those placements are very rigid that fluency usually in Spanish is required to work with detained clients. In those cases, they're not as able to be flexible just due to the nature of the work, if that makes sense. But our host orgs do share their ability to host folks that do not have fluency in a second language, and you'd be able to see that on the matching document. So great question. Wonderful. Here's another question. What is the ratio of selected applicants to total number of applicants? I'm assuming you mean the ratio of selected applicants to total number of fellows selected in the end, I assume is what you mean by this. So it changes every year. For us, we select finalists that we believe would be good fellows, that would be able to succeed in this program and should be able to go through the matching process as a finalist. And so that number varies depending on the number of applicants we receive, the number of qualified applicants we receive. So that can change every year. So we do typically have more finalists than we do placements, but we want you to be able to get in front of a host org, be able to submit your resume and be seen by the host org, because in the end, the host organization often is deciding, of these candidates interested in working with me, who are the folks that will be the best fit for this role. So we go through our selection process to make sure we select folks that will be fantastic Justice Fellows from our perspective, that we believe you would succeed and benefit from this fellowship. And then we allow you to go through the matching process and be seen by host organizations to be considered as a fellow, if that makes sense. Thank you for that question. Right, here's another question. Do the majority of host organizations have fellows work in person or remote? So I'll answer that first, and there's a second part to this question. So I would say the majority of host organizations are either hybrid or fully in person. I think I see in the past few years, we've seen more hybrid options, but there are folks going back to fully in person. We hardly, if ever, have a fully remote position. That is very rare because of the nature of this work. We've had in the past a remote option, but really it's remote because our fellows were traveling in rural areas to meet with clients, if that makes sense. They just weren't required to, go to the physical office because of that. So it's very rare to have a fully remote setting because of the client-centered nature of this work. So it's rare, if ever, and it typically does involve travel. So in answer to that, hybrid or fully in person are typically what we see, but again, you'll be able to look at that on the matching spreadsheet. And then the next part of the question is also, what is the process of selecting a host organization like? For example, I'm specifically interested in asylum or refugee work. Do I get a lot of say in the organizations I would like to work for? So this is a fantastic question. So when we are selecting host organizations each year, when we're looking at their applications, we specifically ask them to detail, if you're selected to host a fellow, what would that fellow do? What type of work will they be working on? Will they be working in removal defense? Will they be doing a lot of affirmative asylum, defensive asylum? We go into a really detailed list of what they expect their fellow will likely work on, because we're asking these organizations to request a fellow based on filling a gap in representation that they see in their community, that they see in their organization. So as part of that, you will see a very detailed list on the matching document, specifically what type of work you'd be working on. So if, working with asylum seekers or refugees is really important to you, you'd be able to see, okay, here's affirmative asylum, here's defensive asylum. What's the percentage of work I would do in this, if I were a fellow at this organization? So if that's a priority to you, you could definitely filter for that and see, if you want to do primarily asylum work, you can go and look and see which organizations expect you to primarily be doing work with asylum seekers, if that makes sense. So you get a say in telling us through your matching, through your ranking, I should say. If you're really interested and that's all you want to work on, so you're only going to rank organizations that work with asylum seekers or refugees, you can show that with how you get back your ranking to us. I hope that helps. That was a bit of a long explanation. Amazing. So another question, since I graduated in spring of 2025, I have my official law school transcript on hand. May I send that in? Absolutely. If you have the official law school transcript easy to access, you're more than welcome to upload that to our portal. But again, it's just not required. So we just don't want you to have to pay for an official transcript at this point in time. If you are selected as a fellow, we'll require a final transcript that's official before you start the fellowship. But for the application process, unofficial is fine. But if you have official, you're welcome to submit that instead. Wonderful. We have a ton of fantastic questions. Thank you guys so much for putting them in the chat. Let's try to get through as many as possible. Wonderful. So the next question is, how important is GPA in the selection process? This is a great question. I would say it's not as important as, we do ask for your transcript, But honestly, we're not looking for your GPA as much as the coursework that you've been working on in law school. That's really our scan of the transcript, is to get a sense of, were you able to take an immigration class, a immigration clinic? What other public interest areas did you explore? We're kind of wanting just to get a sense of your coursework more so than the GPA. We might look at it, but it's not typically a factor of like this person gets in before someone else. GPA varies so much from institution to institution. So I don't know, from my perspective professionally, it's not as heavy of a weight in our selection process as perhaps, if you have immigration experience or public interest experience, clinic experience, internships, things of that nature. So hopefully that helps. So don't stress too much if your GPA isn't a 4.0 or something like that. We're not typically looking for it in that way. We're more so looking at your transcript to see the coursework that you have been doing. On the application form as well, I'll mention, we'll actually ask you to highlight for us. If you were able to take an immigration course, there's also an option if your law school doesn't offer immigration courses, you can let us know that because we know some folks are unable to take them because their school does not necessarily offer them. So on that application form, be sure to highlight for us your immigration coursework, your public interest coursework. We'll ask you a few other things, and that's a great place to highlight. So we're sure not to miss on your transcript what you've been able to do during your law school experience. Wonderful. Another question, do any of the professional development opportunities include language classes? This is a great question. Sometimes when we do have funding, we do have the opportunity to assist with language acquisition is what we call it. So this is not available every year, but it's something we try to consider every year. And if we have the funding available, we do offer to our fellows perhaps reimbursement for taking language classes or maybe an immersion program, things of that nature. But this is not available every year. So it'd be definitely something to inquire more about if you're selected as a fellow for the upcoming class. Okay, great. Great, so here's a fantastic question. Thanks so much for this helpful webinar. I know this opportunity is also open to LLMs and that they should have authorization to work in the US for 2 years. I believe that the 1-year OPT will not cover the entire period and this fellowship doesn't provide sponsorship for the additional year, correct? So I'll answer, there's another part of this question. So unfortunately, that is correct. So this opportunity is open to LM students, but we do need to have that 2 years of work authorization prior to placement available. And this is due to the fact that IJC cannot provide sponsorship, but also our host organizations, they're nonprofits and typically also cannot provide sponsorship to our fellows. So unfortunately, we know this sometimes means LLMs are not fully eligible if you're pursuing the OPT, but sometimes LLM students have other ways of work authorization, so that's why we really want to make sure it's open for folks. But if you do have a question about your specific circumstance, please feel free to email that recruitment general inbox, and we're definitely happy to talk with you on your eligibility. And then the second part of this question says, for current LLM students who don't have their grades yet as they just started a program, do you advise that they submit a transcript from a previous foreign law program? Thanks in advance. So this is a fantastic question because yes, you've likely just started your LLM program. So yes, please feel free if you have previous, foreign law program, you're welcome to submit that. If it's not in English, if you do have it translated, feel free, but don't put too much pressure on that. But we do ask if you're able to at least get like typically you can download something that shows your in progress coursework for the semester. That's super helpful for us to see, what courses are you taking this semester, even if you don't have grades yet. And so that's what I would say would be the requirement. Show us your in progress coursework for the fall semester. If you were able, I don't think you likely were able to register for next semester, you could also share that. But yeah, that's a great question. If you're an LM student, you don't have grades yet, at least share us an in progress of letting us know what coursework you're enrolled in for the fall. And there's also in that application form, we'll ask about coursework. So if there's any coursework in the spring that you think are relevant, you can also share with us there classes you anticipate taking. Wonderful. Oh, this is a great question. If an IJC fellow has or is currently supervising me, is it appropriate to ask them if they are comfortable providing a recommendation letter? Or should I seek a recommender who is not currently an IJC fellow? This is a fantastic question. I wonder if you heard about the fellowship because of this supervision experience with one of our fellows, whether current or alum. And please, if you feel comfortable, you think they can give you again that familiar and comprehensive recommendation letter about your work, especially if you're working with them currently, you're likely working on immigration, you're more than welcome to have a former or current IJC fellow write a letter of recommendation on your behalf. We really do weigh those well if you are in a space and have that opportunity to have an IJC fellow write your recommendation letter, because they know what it is like to go through this program. So if they're writing a recommendation on your behalf and are able to speak to that, we're always very welcome to have those submitted. And we see every year we do have current and alumni fellows often submitting letters of rec for those law graduates coming behind them. So definitely feel free to request that if you feel comfortable in doing so. Wonderful. Oh, this is a great question. So the question asks, there's a section on the application that asks about professional and clinical experience or clinic experience. Should we list the experiences and descriptions, or should they be detailed and grammatically correct paragraphs? So for us, don't overthink this. It's kind of the form that asks a little bit about your coursework, about your clinical experience, your professional experience, and things like that. We just really want to not miss on your resume those experiences. And also we're hoping it reminds you, us cueing you of like, hey, tell us all the immigration, experience you have, or all the clinical experience you have. That way you can really make sure we see it on your resume. Yes, I took these 2 clinics. I did an immigration clinic and I did a human rights clinic. Like, we want to know what you've been working on. And hopefully you can make sure those are reflected on your resume as well. Don't leave those off. If you're mentioning them on the form, most likely it's going to also be on your resume. So these can be bullet points. We'd love to get a sense of what you did. It doesn't have to be super long, especially if your resume covers it. I would look at it more as like a bullet point list, maybe a little descriptor. For instance, if you took an immigration clinic, it'd be great to know like what semester or semesters you took it. So you could say, immigrant justice clinic, spring 2024, fall 2025, whatever is relevant for you. I think look at it more as like a bullet point list to make sure we don't miss that information either on your resume or on your transcript. If it is an immigration related class or a public interest related class that we wouldn't necessarily know from the title, maybe what you worked on, definitely feel free to highlight more about that. Especially if it's like you learned a lot about immigration in a class, but maybe it's not titled immigration law. You're welcome to list that, but give us a description. What did you learn in that human rights class that related to immigration, if that makes sense, if you're claiming it as an immigration class? It's a fantastic question. Here's a great question as well. How important is experience in the process of reviewing applicants? Do we have to have a lot of experience? Absolutely not. You don't have to have a lot of experience, but what we want to see is why you want to do this work. So having experience in the field of immigration law is a helpful support of your interest in immigration, if that makes sense. So it's great to see that as part of your resume or application form, or what you might talk about in your statement of interest. But if you don't have a lot of experience, I would lean heavily on that statement of interest. Let us know, why are you interested in this? Perhaps you did experiences in law school that aren't related to immigration. Why are you now looking to do a immigration direct service fellowship? What has made that shift? What was important in your journey to realize this is the career path you want long term? So you definitely don't have to have a lot of experience. One of my favorite examples of this, I met a student a few years back. I was doing a presentation out in California. And the student came up to me after the presentation, was like, I'm really worried you all will not even look at my application because I have nothing on my application that shows immigration, my entire law school career. I was fully focused on public defense. That's all I wanted to do, is become a public defense lawyer. And what she realized as she was doing her internships and doing her clinics and everything else, she's like, every single client I worked with in this public defense space also had an immigration claim. And she's like, I know I can't be the best public defense lawyer if I don't know how immigration plays a role when I have clients with immigration claims as well. And so that's why she was so passionate about this idea of doing the IJC fellowship, to really do something she hadn't done in law school to that point. And understand that side of the law and kind of that intersection, right, of immigration and criminal defense and public defense and things of that nature. So, but I was like, that's compelling. Like, yes, we might not see it on your resume. We might not see it on your transcript that you focus on immigration, but if you can talk about that and, craft that experience for us and what's led you here in your statement of interest, that's what will bring us in and strengthen your application, if that makes sense. So you don't have to have experience specifically in immigration. It'd be great if you had client work experience, but you don't have to come into this with a lot of experience as long as you can craft your journey here to this moment and why IJC is, the next best step for your career and your goals. I hope that helps. Great. Okay. So we have quite a few more questions. I will try to keep getting, we have about 15 minutes, so I'll get through as many as possible. So the next question is, how many fellows are expected to be accepted this year? So that's a great question. So for our Katzman Justice Fellowship, which is the fellowship available this year, we typically have between 25 and 35 fellows a class. So we don't have a final number yet, but most likely it will be in that range. Great question. Wonderful. Another question. I heard there's a work abroad opportunity with this fellowship. Sorry if I am totally misinformed. If there is, could you say more about that? So there's no work abroad opportunity that IJC hosts with this fellowship. There could be instances of our fellows, like their host organizations perhaps providing a work abroad opportunity, but I haven't heard of those specifically. But how the structure works is, yes, you're an IJC fellow, but you become an employee of the host organization for your 2-year placement. So any opportunities from your host organization would likely be available to you as well as a full-time employee. So if there was an opportunity at an organization in particular, maybe our fellows have taken advantage of it, but there's no structured work abroad opportunity as part of the IJC fellowship, if that makes sense. So that maybe is why you've heard of that, but no, we do not have a work abroad opportunity within the Justice Fellowship. Wonderful. A question kind of around timing. So should the class of 2027 wait until fall of 2026 to apply? So correct. So if you are looking for the class, if you're graduating perhaps in spring of 2027, and you're looking for the class of 2027 that would start September 2027, your application will open in July of 2026. So this upcoming July is when it opens, and it will close in October of 2026 for our 2027 class. So we're a bit of like the academic year before, if that makes sense in our process. So yes, as long as you apply by October 2026 for the class of 2027, that is your timeline. But if you have more specific questions, always feel free to email us and we'd be happy to let you know when the application would go live for you. Wonderful. Another great question. For the purposes of the application, should we align our statement of interest with a specific host organization or only discuss our interest in immigration law generally? This is a fantastic question. I would encourage you to stray away from specific host organizations. And I say this because our application process with host organizations is concurrent. So I don't know who our host organizations for the class of 2026 will be. Our application is actually still open for host organizations. It closes the week before the Justice Fellowship application closes. So I think it'd be a big risk to have a statement of interest saying, I'm only interested in this organization, because what if first off they haven't applied, or what if they're not selected, if that makes sense. If you have experiences working at a host organization that are influential in why you want to be a Justice Fellow, definitely talk about that. If perhaps you interned at one of our current host organizations or former, or maybe an organization in general that we've never worked with, but you could talk about like, hey, during this experience at XYZ organization, it solidified my interest in making immigration law my long-term career, if that makes sense. So you can definitely name drop in a way, but I would stray away from saying that you want to work at this host organization, because this is not the stage of the application process where first off you would know which host organizations are available quite yet. because we won't know quite yet after you've submitted the application, that deadline of October 19th. So we're more interested at this stage to understand why immigration law. Why is this your long-term career goal? Why is the Justice Fellowship the way that you get there? Because you could just go into perhaps a staff attorney role, but like, why the fellowship? Why immigration law? Why long-term? Like, I'd focus in that direction on your statement of interest, and not necessarily say I want to work at this organization, on the off chance, or perhaps the chance, that they are not selected to host this year, or perhaps they didn't even apply to host, if that makes sense. So hopefully that's helpful in regards to your statement of interest. Wonderful. Here's a great question, definitely top of probably a lot of folks' minds. So how secure is funding, especially given recent actions by the federal government? How often is funding dispersed? Would a salary be secured for a 2-year period, or is part of the salary contingent on future funding from the federal government and or others? So fantastic question. So for our Katzman Justice Fellowship that is available this year, this is our traditional fellowship we've had available every year since the start of our fellowship programming. It is funded by private donations, philanthropy dollars, foundations, and things of that nature. So it is not federal government funded, if that makes sense. So it is not contingent on changes in that landscape. So for us, when we offer a fellowship, we are committed to our fellows to ensure that they are in their fellowship for the entirety of the 2 years. So yes, I don't know if that provides any comfort, but especially with this programming, we don't have federal funds as part of this. Typically not even state or city funds. There's some exceptions, but for the most part, this is private dollars, philanthropy dollars, and we only offer as many fellowships as we feel very secure that we could fund you throughout the 2-year placement. So great question. Definitely a lot of difficulty in the current environment, but we are very committed for our fellows to stay in their placements and do this work. That's why we are placing fellows in organizations. We're really intent on making sure that you can continue doing this work during the 2-year fellowship. A question about can you share the host organizations for this year? Again, a great question. I mentioned just a few questions before, but we don't currently have that list quite yet, but it will be fully available for all of our finalists because our applications do run concurrently. But if you have a specific question around I don't know, we have questions on the application form regarding your openness to certain geographies. So please be as honest but open as possible in that, because we do know our placements, at least the geographies, before the interview stage. So perhaps we select you for an interview, but you're like, hey, I only want to be perhaps in Idaho or a specific state. And perhaps we don't have any placements in that state this year. We will reach out to you to let you know and let you consider if you want to move forward with the interview process, knowing that there might not be availability in the geography that you're interested in. So yeah, we won't know. We don't know right now, and we won't know until closer to the finalist stage. Wonderful. Okay, let's see, a few more questions. Okay, this is a great question. Do you have any advice, given the timing, for students also applying to do immigration work with a host org through EJW, SCADN, etc.? Can these host orgs ever become IJC hosts? This is a great question. So every year we have folks, interested in immigration work. Obviously, you're applying to IJC due to us, focusing on immigration, but perhaps you've also applied for a project-based fellowship through EJW or through SCADN. So definitely we get those, those candidates every year that have kind of applied for everything because you're just interested in doing immigration work, and obviously you're committed to the idea of a fellowship program to do that work. So as far as timing, as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure our fellowship application is due after the EJW deadline, I believe the SCADN deadline. So please feel free to finish those applications first. Again, we don't do early review. So as long as your application to us is in by October 19th, at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time, we have no issues. We'll review everyone together after that deadline. So hopefully that can help with timing, because I know it's a lot of applications you're completing in the fall typically. As far as can these host orgs ever become IJC hosts? Absolutely. So we've often had fellows, our IJC fellows be at an organization that also has an EJW fellow or also has a SCADN fellow. So it's not necessarily, there's no barring of host orgs, hosting fellows. All the different kinds, we're not competitive in that sort of way and by any means. So we definitely have IGC hosts that perhaps have other fellows also, doing their work at the organization at the same time as an IGC fellow. So definitely there's a lot of flexibility there, and it has definitely happened in the past as well. I hope that helps. Wonderful. Here's a great question around proficiency. So this person says, I speak Spanish proficiency, or sorry, I speak Spanish proficiently. I used it to help clients over the summer in the public defender's office. I do not know any legal Spanish. Is this sufficient? And I recently just started being interested in immigration law. I'm not sure if I want to do it long-term, but the state of our country, it has sparked this desire in me. Is that okay? So great question. So the first part around Spanish, obviously, legal terms in Spanish is definitely a niche thing. Sometimes, native speakers might not know the legal Spanish jargon, just like, I am not an attorney, I work in recruitment, and I don't know legal jargon sometimes as, even in English as my native language. So for us, how we look at it is, could you work with a client and explain to them in their language? Like, how would you explain asylum to them, even if you don't necessarily know the word for asylum in Spanish? How do you describe it to them? You don't have to, we're looking more like, how do you work with clients? Not all clients will be able to know like attorney level knowledge around this topic, right? But how can you clearly discuss a complex topic in a way that your client could understand when they're approaching, a legal system that they've never encountered before and is very challenging and complex, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't put as much pressure on like knowing legal Spanish. It's more, can you communicate with the client? You don't have to know all of the fancy words and definitions, but like, could you communicate to them, the type of relief perhaps that you believe they qualify for? Could you explain that to them in their language, if that makes sense? So definitely we do have basically like our language, we look for folks, how do I say it? So we do a language assessment for anybody that lists that they are a professional level speaker in Spanish or fluent in Spanish. And so for us, a professional level speaker is you could work with a client and have very limited work. Like you would have limited need to use an interpreter for that work, if that makes sense. Fluent would mean you absolutely would not need an interpreter. So there is some wiggle room. Like you might believe you're, professional. It sounds like you professionally were able to use Spanish for clients. So I definitely think, if you feel comfortable with that assessment after you read the definitions, definitely feel free to put professional and go for that. And then the other part of that question, being recently interested in immigration law, not sure if you want to do it long term, I would really, think about, okay, if you don't want to do this long term, that's a little bit tougher for us because that is one thing that we're looking for, right? How do you use your knowledge from the 2 years of the fellowship to help in your career and also advance perhaps immigrant justice? Perhaps we have a lot of fellows that perhaps want to go into policy. We get candidates a lot. They're like, I want to go into policy work and I need to understand direct services and immigration in order to do that. So I think I would just really consider in your statement of interest how you're going to talk about that. If you can't genuinely say, yes, I want to be, in direct services for immigration for the rest of my career, which again, our fellows don't always stay in direct service, but they're typically 90% of them stay within the field of immigration in general. What is this fellowship going to assist you with, if that makes sense? But definitely talk about your passion. You mentioned, the state of the world has kind of made you really passionate about this. Talk about that, but talk to us why and how you will use this for whatever your career goals are long term. Great. So I know we're coming up with just about 2 minutes left. I'm going to stay on, but anyone for a little bit longer. We still have a lot of open questions. So I'm just going to try to highlight some of the ones that are similar. But if I don't answer your question, please email us with your question. We will email you back. So here's a great question I do want to answer. In the event that we have 3 references who know us equally well, should we opt for 1 professional reference, 1 academic clinical, or kind of like what's the breakdown? So if they all know you equally well, we would love to see a professional reference and an academic reference. You could split it up. I would lean more professional than like too academic unless one is a clinic. Like I'd prioritize the clinic before someone that only knows you in class, if that makes sense. And then the professional experience. So if you have a clinic experience, an academic experience, and a professional experience, I would opt for clinic and then profession. But it's really up to you and who you think will provide you, that recommendation letter that really stands out. Wonderful. Wonderful. So I'm going to just look for some more. Wonderful. A question about eligibility. Is it a hard no for anyone who's more than 2 years past graduation? I have a couple things lined up, including a clerkship. Yes, unfortunately, it is a 2-year hard eligibility deadline. And so unfortunately, if you graduated before spring of 2024, you would not be eligible for this class, unfortunately. But feel free to email us if you want to talk more about your situation. A question, do IJC assignments include international travel? No, they typically do not. Most work is done locally here because it's, obviously within the US immigration system that folks are representing clients. Can applicants submit more than 2 letters of recommendation? No. For equity of everyone, we only accept 2 letters of recommendation. So like the previous question that came in, definitely just prioritize whichever 2 would do the best job of sending a recommendation letter. And again, I would opt for experience over coursework if you kind of have that spread. So clinical experience and a professional experience. If your third one's academic, I'd lean towards the experiential ones that have seen you in action, seen you working, seen your passion around working with clients or in immigration, public interest, anything like that. So there's a few questions around the application process and like questions specifically around the material. So I'm going to encourage you all to come to our webinar next week and ask those questions, or feel free again to email us around like course titles, descriptions. So please feel free to do that. I know we are a minute over. I'm just going to scroll through more questions to see if there's any important ones to talk through as a group. But again, if I miss your question, please feel free to email us and we'll be sure to answer. This is a fantastic question. Is the expectation that the fellow will sit for the bar in the state where they are placed? For instance, graduating 3L fellows find out their placement before the registration deadline for the bar exam in the state where they get placed. This is a wonderful question. It comes up every year. So our fellows are expected to either be barred or take the July bar exam prior to the start of the fellowship. That is kind of what we look for in our fellows. Either you already, took the bar and passed, perhaps you graduated a little bit earlier than, say this class, the spring class, and you're able to take the bar and pass, or if you are a 3L graduating, we're expecting you to take the July bar exam. In regards to the state in which you take it, as part of that matching process, we ask our host organizations, do you have a requirement for state bar exam? Do you have a preference for state bar exam? Or do you just need someone to be barred somewhere and so you don't have a preference? Since a lot of immigration work is at the federal level, sometimes state bars aren't as important. However, if your placement might have you work with children, for example, a state bar exam could be very specific to the organization because you might be required to appear in state court to represent, like through the CINJ proceedings and things like that. Sometimes you need to go through the state court component. So you'll be able to see in that matching document if they have a requirement, a preference, or no preference, essentially. And so if you are placed with a organization that says, hey, yes, we require the state bar exam, we would encourage you to take that state bar exam. You can also discuss it with the organization during your meeting in that kind of week span where you get to talk more with them. So we definitely encourage you to look at that. But again, you should know your placement before February 1st is our goal, so that hopefully we'll meet. You should know the expectation of state bar exam before most registration deadlines. But that's a fantastic question. I'm glad we were able to answer that live. Wonderful. Another question, could you clarify whether the immigration work in this fellowship involves actual legal practice, such as client representation and case advocacy, or is it more focused on application assistance and administrative support? It definitely is more so legal practice, representing clients and case advocacy. Our fellows are, doing asylum applications, representing in individual hearings. They are working directly with clients doing that work. Of course, there are sometimes, you work in with a pro se application assistance clinic because the host org is doing it and all employees are required to maybe do a day or something out of their month. So you may do a little bit of application assistance and of course administrative support and things like that, but the main focus is you are an attorney representing clients in their immigration proceedings, helping them seek relief, or whatever their goals or outcomes are and what's available to them. So that's a great question. I hope that helps. I've seen a couple of questions about if this is available for a 1-year fellowship or does it have to be 2 years long? It is a 2-year fellowship. We feel this is really important because 1 year in is not enough time to really be able to take advantage of, first off, all the trainings provided, really get that foundation of immigration knowledge and expertise. That 2 years is really important to us and is part of why our fellowship was developed as a 2-year program. So it is not available as a 1-year fellowship. It will be a 2-year commitment, if that makes sense. Wonderful. Here's another great question. What if you find out you failed the bar exam after getting accepted? So unfortunately, it does happen every year. We often have, a couple fellows that have not passed the bar exam on their first attempt. So basically, we reach out to you, our fellowship team reaches out to you to talk about, basically let us know that you did not pass the bar exam. And we reach out and have that second time bar test taking programming where our fellowship team connects you with an alumni that was in that situation. We also have programming to make sure you have time off to study before your next attempt. We have agreements with our host orgs to make sure you have, I think it's about 4 weeks of study time before typically the February bar exam is what you're expected to take next. But just know we are here to support you. We know the bar exam is a very challenging task. And so if you do happen to fail the bar exam, you just let us know. We get you connected with programming and support and mentorship and try our best to set you up for a great second attempt. Wonderful. There was somebody asking for the application link again, so I'm just going to go back. Here's the QR code as well as the link. You can go to justthejusticecorps.org and you'll be able to see there should be an apply kind of banner or on the Justice Fellowship page, there's an apply now. So feel free to use that if you need a link to the application. Wonderful. Somebody said, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much if you've stuck around. I know we're a bit past time, so thank you so much if you're sticking around for answers to your questions. I'm going to do my best. Questions have started coming in slower, so I'll do my best to answer as many as possible, but please feel free to hop off at any point. We're so appreciative that you were here, and you're always welcome to email us if you have any follow-up questions, and please be sure to attend the webinar next week. If you're applying, I'll put this screen back up as well. We'd love to see you there and get into more of the specifics of your application questions and the materials. Wonderful. There's a question on, would there be any way to improve other languages during the fellowship, like any tie-up with language learning opportunities? So I'm not 100% sure. Tie-up with language learning opportunities. So typically our funding is for Spanish learning specifically, but that's definitely something you can inquire more about. Again, this is all funding dependent, so we don't have Spanish language acquisition available every year. So if you're selected as a fellow and you have an interest, you're welcome to reach out and inquire, and we can let you know if there's funding available or if we're able to do that. But typically it is Spanish. Wonderful. There's a question on, is there any way to look through host organizations sorted by location? I do not believe so on our website. That's a great question. That's actually a really great question. I might ask our communications team who manages the website if there's a way to maybe add at least what state they're located in. So you could at least control F if there's not, there's not really a sorting method on our website. But if you do have questions about, organizations in a specific state that we've worked with, feel free to email us at our recruitment inbox and we can do a shorter list. We have an easier way on our back end to sort. So if you're curious in your area or something like that, please just let us know on our recruitment inbox. Great. There's a question on what is the average salary? So that's really tough to answer. We like to reiterate that minimum of $62,500 per year because that's what we can guarantee. But any amount higher than our guaranteed minimum is an agreement between you and your host organization. So we don't take We don't calculate average salary across all the different host orgs, if that makes sense, because for us, we are providing that minimum of 62,500. So I hope that helps. Cool. This is a fantastic question. Maybe we'll end on this one. I know there's a lot that I wasn't able to get to, but I want to be respectful of time. So please, if I didn't answer your question, please reach out to us at this recruitment inbox with your question. We'd be happy to answer. Or if it was regarding, again, application materials, or quite a few I skipped over because we're going to go into a lot more detail next week at that webinar. This is a fantastic question to end on. What have previous fellows stated about their favorite things they took away or experienced working with IJC? So I think this is fantastic. What I hear over and over again from, fellows that have just started, in their first year, from fellows that are graduating, from our alumni that we stay in touch with, it is always the community. It is the network. It is being connected with other immigration advocates doing this work, even when it's tough, and having that community around them. And I think there's something about like a mutual understanding of like, you made it through this justice fellowship. What does that mean? What was the work you were doing? Working with clients, working through different administrations, working through different policy changes, having folks around you that are like-minded, working towards the same goal of immigrant justice, and understanding the experience you're going through and being able to empathize with you in a way that perhaps folks that aren't immigration attorneys couldn't, because they haven't walked in your shoes. That is what we hear most from our fellows, is that connection, that network, that community of current and alumni fellows that they are, connected with for life. I think it's incredible, this idea that, if you start with the class of 2026, you're going to be connected to folks that started their career 12 years ago by the time you start your fellowship from our inaugural class. Like, that is over a decade of experience, and knowing what this work is like and being able to gain that like knowledge of just the experience of this work and sharing that with others. So I think that's what I hear most. I also hear a lot about the trainings, but I will say overall, it's always the community, joining like-minded community of folks doing this work and understanding what it's like to go through this work. So that was a fantastic question. So we will end it here, but again, please feel free, email us if we missed your question, or please attend next week. Again, I'll put this up. So our next webinar is on Wednesday, October 1st at 4 p.m. Eastern. It will be the tips and tricks, everything about the application process. We're going to go through every piece of the application, give our advice. We want you to submit the strongest application possible for consideration. So please come to that webinar, or definitely, again, if you register for any of our webinars, we will send you a recording. So if you're unable to attend live next week, please be sure to register so we can at least send you a copy of the recording. But we're really, really thankful. There are so many folks here on the call today, and fantastic questions. I'm so sorry we were unable to get to them all, but thank you for sticking around if you did through to the end. So we hope you all have a wonderful night. Again, feel free to reach out to us. I'll put it again on this screen, our recruitment@justicecorps.org, or feel free to reach out to me directly at ourvote@justicecorps.org, and we'd be happy to get back to you. Hope you have a great rest of your nights. Thank you so much. Take care.